The next major civilization that we have are going to be the Islamic civilizations. And within the Islamic world, there's actually a number of civilizations that we need to talk about. And some of these will last for quite some time. One of the big things that is coming out of the 15th century, and again, you want to make sure that you highlight what I highlight, is that the long fragmented Islamic world crystallized into four major states or empires. Um, Not that long after the death of Muhammad, you have a series of small caliphates. And again, we'll deal with this a little bit later in a video or a PowerPoint. After the caliphates kind of broke apart, the Islamic world is fragmented into all like these little hunks. Well, within the 15th century, by the 15th century, the Islamic world had crystallized into these four major groups. The first one here, the Ottoman Empire. And then the Safavid Empire. The Ottomans we're going to be talking about for quite some time. The Safavids are going to be a little bit more of a flash in the pan. They're not going to last anywhere near as the Ottomans, because in fact, the Ottomans are going to last for, nearly or over, just over 500 years. So we're going to start off with here with the Islamic heartland, with the Ottoman and Safavid empires. And again, we'll deal with these guys, especially the Ottomans and another empire, in a little bit more detail later on. But here, the Ottoman Empire is going to last from the 14th to the early 20th century. So it is lasting from the 1300s to the early 1900s. In fact, the Ottoman Empire will fall apart only after World War One. And the territory is absolutely huge at its height. It's going to be Anatolia, Eastern Europe, much of the Middle East, North African coast, lands around the Black Sea. I mean, this is definitely one of the biggest empires that we will deal with. And even though it seems as though it will constantly be in decline, the reality of how long this empire lasts and the size of its empire is going to make it really, really incredibly impressive. And you'll also notice that they will kind of come and go as being a major powerhouse to being a little bit more of a lightweight. And the European, in particularly, the European reaction to them is going to be kind of interesting depending on what their level of perceived threat will be. But the big thing that the Ottomans want to do, and especially because they have the size to do it, is they have a major effort to try to bring a new unity to the Islamic world. And you'll see a couple different Islamic revivals in some later chapters coming out from within the Ottoman Empire as an attempt to recreate that unity that existed in the very early years of the Caliphates. Early on, the Ottomans, of course, are going to be very aggressive towards Christian lands. And this really begins with the fall of Constantinople in 1453. Constantinople had been the capital of the Eastern Roman Empire, which eventually became known as the Byzantine Empire. It was typically seen as a Christian empire, especially once the Romans convert to Christianity. But Ottoman Turks are going to come in and they will actually go and take Constantinople as their own and convert that and a large swath of what had been this Christian, there's the Eastern Orthodox Byzantine Empire into an Islamic empire. These guys are also going to expand as well, or attempt to expand as well. And in 1529, they're going to make it all the way north and west to what is now modern day Austria and actually lay siege to Vienna, although they won't necessarily be successful with it. During this time of Ottoman aggression, the Europeans, of course, are going to be fearful of Turkish expansion because for two reasons. I mean, not only do you have this aggressive, expansion minded group of people basically as your next door neighbors. Sure, so you're always kind of concerned when are they going to try to come and take your property. But on top of this, in the Christian mind, you also have them being the bad guy in the mind and the fact that they are Muslims. So for the Europeans, it's going to be against the Ottomans, it's going to kind of be a double-edged sword. But then on the other hand, they're also fascinated by them. They like the trading techniques and some of the other ideas that are coming out of the Ottoman Empire, and they'll also actively do business with them. The relationship is also going to become weird once the Ottoman Empire is in decline. They're still going to have this, oh no, the Ottoman Empire, but it's going to be, oh no, they're collapsing. What are we going to do? Because we kind of have this special relationship with them. And if they collapse, who's going to come in? And we're going to still have that special relationship. It just becomes really complicated the later that we get within Ottoman history. Next to the Ottoman Empire is going to be the Safavid Empire. And this is going to emerge in Persia from the Sufi religious order. And we'll get to the Sufis here in a moment. But Persia is modern day Iran and a little bit of Iraq. So again, it's Middle Eastern. It's just to the east of the Ottomans. What I need you to do here is I want you to underline Sufi. Okay. And then just draw a little arrow over to the side here, because I think that this note will fit better on this side because we kind of have a big note that will come later on here. So you want to put down here, and again, if you draw an arrow, you don't have to like rewrite Sufi. Just put down that this is the mystical form of Islam. This is the mystical form of Islam who wanted direct contact with God, who wanted direct contact with God. The Safavid Empire is going to be established shortly after 1500. So it ends up being a little bit younger than its next door neighbors of the Ottomans. But what again is going to separate them from their next door neighbors is the Safavids are going to impose Shia Islam as the official religion of the state. And this is where some of the conflict between the Safavid Empire and the Ottoman Empire is going to come in. It's going to come in because of religious tensions. So you want to underline here in B underneath number 3, underline Shia Islam, and then draw an arrow. You want to go up a little bit because we have a note that's also going to follow this as well. But you want to put down here for Shia Islam, and again, if you just underline it and draw an arrow, then you don't have to rewrite Shia. You want to put, please, this is the more conservative form of Islam, the more conservative form of Islam, who believes leadership of Islam can only come from a descendant of Muhammad, and that leader had both political and religious authority. So, in other words, according to Shia, the leader of Islam had to have direct biological descent from Muhammad. And they were kind of like a BOGO leader. They were both a political leader as well as a religious leader. In other words, there was no separation of church and state. So not only are these two empires competitive, because let's face it, empires want to do one thing, they also want, they want to both expand, but you also have a religious component to it because the Ottomans are going to be Sunni, and we'll get to what that means here in a second. And these guys, because they want more land, and also because they're opposite forms, almost like opposite forms of Islam, these guys are going to fight periodically for about a century, between the early part of the 16th century to the early part of the 17th century. The Safavids, by the way, are not going to be able to weather the storm. They're just simply going to be too small. It also doesn't help that there to their east is going to be another empire who, just like the Ottomans, want more territory. But the big issue, or one of the issues also with the Ottomans, is that they are Sunni Muslim. So you want to underline Sunni Muslim, and then I'll kind of give you the definition. So again, just underline Sunni Muslim, draw an arrow, and then we can put the note, somewhere over in here underneath the last note that you had. That would be fine. So you want to put, please, here that this is a more common form of Islam, a more common form of Islam, who believes in a separation of political power from religious leadership. So, in other words, the Sunni have separation of church and state, and the leader obviously does not have to be any type of direct descendant of Muhammad. The two other empires, Islamic empires, that I want to touch base on, um, and these guys are kind of on the fringes geographically. To the right, or rather to the east of the Safavid Empire into India, is going to be the Mughal Empire. And then in Africa, we're going to end up having the Songhai Empire. Songhai Empire doesn't necessarily last too horribly long in comparison with some of these other empires. And that, to be honest with you, is going to be a consequence of the transatlantic slave trade that we'll get to here in a couple other chapters. But specifically where we are, it's going to rise in West Africa in the second half of the 15th century. And here, even though it's a quote unquote Islamic empire, Islam was limited largely to the urban elites. One of the reasons why Islam is limited to the urban elites is one of the main ways in which Islam is spreading. And Islam will be spreading through the various trade routes. So, what you have is you have some Muslim traders coming into West Africa, and traders are only going to be doing business with those people with money. And along with those exchange of goods and services, you're also going to get an exchange of religion and culture as well. Eventually, the Songhai Empire will become a major center of Islamic learning and trade, and a lot of that has to do with the conversion of those elites and also of their kings, their emperors, those types of things. The other empire here that I want to deal with. And again, this is going to be just like with the Ottomans, this is going to be one that's going to hang around for quite some time, is going to be the Mughal Empire. And this is created India by a Turkic group that invaded India in 1526. Again, a little bit younger than the Ottoman Empire, but also invaded by a Turkic group as well. Over the 16th century, the Mughals are going to gain control politically of most of India, and their big task is to create a partnership between Hindus and Muslims. And the reason for this, you want to put a little note over here, and this might be common sense, but it might not necessarily be common sense. You want to put down here next to B underneath number 2 that the majority of people are Hindus. The majority of people are Hindus. So you have these Mughals who are politically in control of the vast majority of India, but they're a religious minority. So they're really going to have to work to kind of win over the religious majority and not really have many or as many problems being a religious minority. You're going to see that there is this constant back and forth going on that we'll get into a later chapter. The age of these four great Muslim empires is sometimes called the second flowering of Islam. First flowering of Islam was immediately following Muhammad and his death. And within this second flowering of Islam, we have a new energy, prosperity, and cultural brilliance. We're also going to have the spread of Islam to new areas such as Southeast Asia. And this is going to be important to put down, and I had mentioned it earlier, but you want to put down, again, somewhere in this particular area, and it's just sort of kind of like a general note, Do you want to put, please, here that Islam in general during this time spread through the various trade routes? This is going to be, like I said earlier, not only how Islam gets to Africa, but they'll also get to Southeast Asia via the trade routes as well. And not only, are we spreading Islam through trade routes, there's also going to be wandering holy men. This is going to be a huge difference from Islam's first flowering, where that was done through basic conquest.